Hello everyone, yep, we're back with another BMW review, but this one is the all-new X1, and it's the petrol car in M Sport trim, which apparently everyone's going to buy. So let's hit the road and see if it's worth your money. All right, so now we are on the road for our first and very quick drive of this new X1. Now, there are so many changes to this car. I mean, it's bigger, it's taller, and it's a little bit wider as well. And crucially, actually, for the purposes of this particular quite sporty model, it's got a wider track as well. So there's a lot of improvements offered, both in terms of practicality and in theory, in terms of handling. But first I'll run through the former, or at least what I can do from the front seat. Now you've probably spotted we're sat in BMW's new interior, which means I have operating system 8, as they call it, with a curved touchscreen ahead of me, or a curved screen, which is a touchscreen on the left side, which means you get goodies like augmented reality on the sat nav, and just really nice, clean, crisp, and smartphone-like graphics. The menus, everything, really nice to use. This is the same system that's featured in the iX1, which is the electric version of this car that we drove the other day and that you've hopefully watched the video of. If not, find a link on the screen now. When it comes to this model though, this is the petrol car and it's the 23i model, and it actually comes in M Sport trim. I've just arrived on a dual carriageway, so I can talk you through what this engine is like. It's a 2-litre turbocharged engine. It's got 218 horsepower and 360 newton meters of torque. BMW claims it's good for a 7.1 second 0 to 62 mile per hour time, which is, I'd say, warm hatch. A few years ago, that was hot hatch territory. Now, warm hatch territory. But when it comes to this engine, if I drop down a couple of gears in the auto box, yeah, that picks up smooth and nice, revs nicely over 5,000 RPM. Not surprisingly, we know this engine pretty well. It's got a really smooth delivery with that quite flat torque figure, which means that effectively, kind of doesn't matter what gear you're in, as long as you're in one of the 2 or 3 that are relevant for your moment, you'll get a nice smooth delivery of acceleration, and then the power will build towards the red line. Doesn't sound particularly exciting though, but that's because this isn't an M-tuned model, it's just the M Sport trim, which means it gets slightly firmer suspension, very slightly anyway, and you get the M Sport bodywork, and other than that, it's just a Bogo X1, but it's got some punch. You do of course get other M Sport trinkets on the car, and the interior is a quite generic place, which is not a bad thing in this latest architecture. It doesn't have anything that screams M Sport to you, apart from, I've noticed on the steering wheel there's a little M badge, but other than that it just feels like a premium X1 interior. Nice cabin, nice place to be. When it comes to the gearbox as well, now they've integrated, and this is new for this generation of X1, there's a new boost button on the left shift paddle, which effectively, and if I click back into the normal drive, I had it in manual mode, if I now hold that down, it just drops me into the best gear to give me the most performance for that moment. So if you are, for example, on a B road and you want to overtake the lorry ahead and you spot a gap, but you don't want to be fumbling around clicking through gears trying to figure out where you should be, click and hold that. The car will do the work for you and push you back down to the best gear for that moment to give you the most power delivery, most torque for that moment. You can do your overtake and be as safe as possible. It's a nice system there, if potentially a bit gimmicky, but I can see where it'd be necessary sometimes. Other things to note, ride feels good. Not overly cushioned, but as I said, M Sport trimmings, you know, this has the excuse that it can be slightly more sporty in feel, even if it isn't genuinely a sporty hatchback. It does seem like it rides quite nicely. The wheels on these cars now are all quite big. 17-inch wheels at the bottom end. You can go up to 19-inch wheels on this spec car. But yeah, if I roll over a cat's eye here, yeah, it feels pretty good. It's quite comfortable, nice and refined. A little bit of road noise, but nothing too significant. Nothing in the way of wind noise as far as I can hear. So they've done a really good job of insulating this cabin. Also, the seating position in this car is really nice. You are a bit higher overall in this car than you were in the previous generation. That's the fashion now, you know, everyone wants to have an elevated view. But for drivers like myself who like to feel like they're really part of the car, you can lower the seats. So I'm surrounded by this interior here and I feel quite cocooned in my surroundings, or my immediate surroundings, but then by contrast, the surroundings elsewhere in the cabin, it's nice and airy, nice and clear. I've got panoramic sunroof above me, which stretches across the whole length of the roof, and then big door mirrors, nice visibility out the back. So I feel like there's really good visibility, and I've got a relatively commanding view of the road, but yet at the same time I feel nice and embedded into the car. So it's the best of both worlds, I'd say. Okay, so now we're getting onto a bit of open B road. So before I find the corner I've been looking for the past 5 minutes, I should say that this car is front biased in its delivery because, as I mentioned earlier, this is a front wheel drive platform, but this being an xDrive model, it does send power to the rear when necessary. So when you put it into sport mode, it's pretty much all the time. When you have it in normal mode, as I am now, it will send power to the front, and then in moments of slip or when you've demanded a bit more power on a corner exit or something like that, it will then start sending torque to the rear. But I'm going to click through now into sport mode, which gives us, as it says here, a dynamic setting. So that actually is talking about the dash here. It changes the colors on the dash and things like that. But it also just sharpens up that accelerator pedal, and I can just feel, the car feels a tiny bit more eager. But actually, and this is something I noticed in the iX1, and I like this, the steering doesn't seem to weight up. If it does, it's such a small amount, I genuinely can't notice the difference. And I like that. I don't like fake weighting on steering systems when there's not tons of steering feel. This doesn't do that, but it does sharpen the throttle up for you, and I can feel the gearbox is a little quicker through its shifting. It's a little quicker on the way up and a bit quicker on the way down as well. And if I open it up, the car does feel quite eager over the front end. It's very similar to the iX1 actually, which is quite impressive to see how these very different powered models feel quite similar. The car feels quite positive over the front axle, and I just had a moment just around a corner there where I just came off the power and turned in, and I wanted to see if it did hot hatch style lift off oversteer, and it doesn't do oversteer, or certainly wouldn't do at road speeds, but it does allow you to tighten your line. It does feel like the front of the car is the dominant factor in direction travel. It's a very positive nose on the car, and you don't find it pushing or running wide if you go in with momentum. What happens instead is actually the front will go in, and then the rear will come around with what I sense is a feeling of plumbed in agility, but it is still a very safe and secure platform. This car does not want to do anything particularly reckless or overly exciting. Although you can turn off the traction control and stability control systems, which I think is telling again of BMW's intent to make this feel like the sportier car in the class. A lot of cars in this class, you can't genuinely turn the systems off, but you can genuinely turn it off in this car. Here's some bumps on a bend. So this is proper B-road stuff. It does well. It soaks them up quite well, actually. It's definitely, I mean, it's not a really cushioned ride. I think I said that earlier, but it's definitely capable of staying planted and composed around corners. Doesn't roll around too much. Feels nicely planted with just a little bit of body roll. Yeah, we've done a good job with this one. All right, so that's another positive drive in an X1. I really like the way that these X1s, including the iX1 we drove last time, I like the way they're very positive over the front end. It feels really nimble on the nose, quick steering. Although I have to say, this car, which actually is running on 20-inch alloys, they're a bit bigger than the standard ones you get on this M Sport. Well, it is a bit fidgety, a little bit firm. So I think if you're looking for a more comfortable experience, you might want to consider the lesser cars, or at least the smaller wheels. But for those of us who enjoy corners and going around bends, combining this 218 horsepower 2 litre with this setup is a nice, enjoyable package, which is a bit of a surprise for the X1. I also, as I think I've said about 12 times, really like the interior in these cars. I think the new layout is brilliant. I do miss the iDrive rotary knob thing, but everything else I really like. And if you want to see more of the interior of this X1, click the link in our description to find our iX1 review, because that covers the interior in a lot more detail. It's basically the same, barring a small amount of difference in the boot space overall. Otherwise, it's the same. So click that if you want to see more of that. Otherwise, it's goodbye from this car, and thank you from me for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, of course, click the like button and do subscribe to our channel. See you later.